This program is brought to you by the combined resources of the Wisconsin Historical Society and Wisconsin Public Television.
Well, I'd like to welcome you guys all to the History Harvest this morning. What we're doing is we're collecting information, and all the stuff that's collected will be available to us after it's done. So you don't want to leave the forum with the visitor. You keep that at your table. Have fun today. If you have questions, you can track us down and we'll do our best to answer them.
In this place, on this day, people have come to share their past with the history keepers of Green Bay and Brown County, Wisconsin. Everyone has a past, every family, every city, every nation. But for the past to become history, it needs a keeper. An event like this could happen in any community, big or small. But it is happening here because more than a century ago, dedicated women and men began to nurture the belief that history matters. And because that legacy has been embraced down through the generations, this place is today enriched and illuminated by yesterday. This is the story of the people who recorded and preserved the past so that it could be pondered and interpreted far into the future. And people who continue to make it possible for those yet to come to learn from those who came before. This is the story of the History Keepers.
Funding for The History Keepers was provided by lead gifts from Irene Daniel Kress and Patricia Baer, with major support from Philip J. and Elizabeth B. Hendrickson, Wisconsin Public Service, Associated Bank, the Kress Family Foundation and Green Bay Packaging, the Robert T. and Betty Rose Meyer Foundation, the Long Family Foundation. Additional support from the Joseph and Sarah Van Dries Charitable Trust, John and Gisela Brogan, Vincent Zarin, and the Wisconsin History Fund, supported in part by the National Endowment for the Humanities.
In early autumn of the year 1824, the writer, with friends, arrived at Green Bay. There were about 30 houses in the place and 2 stores. We were a happy band, united in all social feelings without jealousy or envy, not made unhappy by the riches of a neighbor, for riches were possessed by none of us. We were about equal in worldly goods, none very poor and none rich. Life was fresh and bright. We all had to work hard, but we were young. The popular amusement, it seems almost unnecessary to say, was dancing.
Like all floods, it began with a trickle. When Elizabeth Baird penned her early recollections for the Green Bay Gazette in 1882, she sparked a local love for history that has grown steadily as it flowed down through the generations. In a state that had established its own historical society even before statehood, Green Bay's growing interest in its roots stood out.
When the State Historical Society started to branch out and decided to have these affiliate societies and create actual historical societies around the state, the Brown County Historical Society is the first, it was the Green Bay Historical Society then, was the first affiliated historical society in October of 1899.
As the 19th century became the 20th, it was mostly a man's world. But one place where women were welcome was the Historical Society. While the men were making the history, the women were busy recording and preserving it. In Green Bay, those women were led by Deborah Martin.
She was an interesting woman because she had this close group of women that worked together to get things done. And there were about, anywhere between 6 and 10 women that were about the same age. And they worked on all different kinds of projects. Some of them were interested in history. Some of them were artists. Frederica Crane was a wonderful artist. So when they needed a drawing of a building for a book they were publishing, they'd get Frederica to go out and do a pen and ink drawing of something so that they could have an illustration.
Deborah Martin was a prolific writer, a librarian, and an avid preservationist, working tirelessly to keep the riches of the past from being lost. Her major work was the 1913 History of Brown County.
It's still the best source for the history of Brown County. Debbie Martin was just wonderful. She really was. And it was because of her that many of the early buildings were saved. And Tank Cottage was moved off of the riverfront because the lumber companies wanted to be in that riverfront. There was this long history of this building. For a long time, it was considered to be the oldest house in Wisconsin. She was right on the ball. She knew that those buildings needed to be saved. She figured out how to get them moved back off the river. I don't know how they did it. They would have had to have done it with horses and wagons and all of that stuff. Then they put a library in it. She made the buildings usable, rather than just being this empty shell. She made it so it was an asset to the community in another way than just being the historic building. She was so bright.
Houses were the largest, though certainly not the only things Deborah Martin and her friends were saving for the future. But what is the good of keeping history if you can't share it with others? Another small beginning was about to launch a lasting institution, the Neville Public Museum of Brown County.
In 1915, a group of women, all women and from very prominent Green Bay families, wanted to raise money to put a new flagpole on the courthouse lawn. So in order to do this, they said, okay, let's have an exhibit of old things. So they collected shawls and spinning wheels and various old things from around Green Bay. They got permission from the folks at the Carnegie Library to have a couple of display cases and show it. It cost $0.25 to get in, and that was the origin of the museum, because this was such a popular thing that it was supposed to run for like a weekend and then a week and then it was a month, and it just kept going. And so many people wanted to see this stuff that they decided, well, boy, we should really have a museum here, and that's how it all started. By 1916, you've got this guy, A.C. Neville, who's shown up, a lawyer and a very dedicated amateur historian. He was obsessed with all things historical. His second wife was Ella Hose Neville, and Ella Hose Neville was a force to be reckoned with. You could either like her or hate her, but you could not ignore her. When A.C. died, Ella Hose Neville hired Henry L. Ward, their first professional director. He was really steeped in sort of a natural history background. He thought it was important to collect local bird specimens and geological things, as well as Native American stuff. He felt that was very important. A lot of local photographers started to donate their collections to the museum. One of the guys, Otto Stiller, carried a camera when he went through Green Bay. So you have these wonderful candid shots, beautifully framed, beautifully exposed, of people going around their daily business. And you don't get to see that very often. But over the time, the collections really grew exponentially. Now we have about 1 million artifacts in the collection and well over 1 million photographs.
It is one thing to recognize the value of historic objects. It is something else again to hold on to them. Fortunately, there was no shortage of strong women in Green Bay and vicinity. One of the strongest was Jessie Buchanan.
She herself preferred to be behind the scenes. She was a moving force of encouraging others to become involved and to make a difference in the community. Jessie was born in 1877. 2 young doctors came to Green Bay. She and her sister married these doctors. And this was the time of the Grand Tour. So they traveled extensively in Europe. At that time, Jessie became interested in collecting antiques. After the Grand Tour, she lamented to her friends Sarah Martin and Deborah Martin, they were neighbors as well as good friends, that she needed something to do. And they said to her, well, with all of your interest in history, why don't you look into the history regionally of the Green Bay area? Well, Jessie never did anything half-hearted. She plunged in with a vengeance. And soon she was just absolutely immersed. She really wanted to make Green Bay the Mecca of history. She found out that there was going to be an estate sale of the Tank Cottage furnishings, and she rallied a group of women to let them know that these artifacts and furnishings from our early families, that they were finding their way into the Chicago art market. And she said, we need to find an organization willing to ensure that these artifacts and treasures and furnishings stay in the community. And so that was the founding of this group of women who established the Green Bay De Pere Antiquarian Society. And the reason it was Green Bay De Pere, because her sister was there. I have never in my studies and research found another organization statewide or regionally that does this type of thing, whose purpose is to more or less support the efforts of other historical entities by providing funds to restore, preserve, to find and retrieve and place in the historical buildings actual artifacts from that time period. So this whole period of Deborah Martin and all these wonderful women certainly took charge in their own way and made things happen. Very influential.
With a growing love and enthusiasm for local history, it was practically inevitable that some of the Green Bay history keepers would begin to set their sights on a larger target. It was time to go national.
When the rail first came to Green Bay, to this area in 1862, the Green Bay Advocate, the newspaper, likened the sound of the locomotive to Gabriel's trumpet, awakening the dead and ushering in a new era of progress. So it's hard for us to understand today what rail meant to those people back then. It was technologically equivalent to a spaceship. The Railroad Museum really began as an idea. Several local businessmen thought it would be a great idea to bring a locomotive and put it in a park in Green Bay. But it grew from there, and they got additional trains, additional locomotives, additional cars. Then they were able to get the designation as a National Railroad Museum, as a congressional act. And now 75,000 visitors a year on average from all over the world. I've lived in other communities. I've never lived in one like this that has that sense of history, that the history here is special. And there's a great deal of ownership in the history of this region. And there's a great sense that that needs to be passed on to successive generations. So it's not surprising that Green Bay would have been selected by these gentlemen as a site for a National Railroad Museum. So that those kids and those individuals who don't know anything about trains, who've never ridden a train, get a sense of what rail meant to America.
See you next week.
Part of keeping history is handing it down from generation to generation, an unbroken line into the future. But once in a great while, there's an opportunity to pass that history along to an entire community. In Green Bay, that opportunity came to Jack Rudolph.
Went to West Point, was a colonel during the Second World War, came back after the war, and started writing for the Press-Gazette, local history articles. And then in 1958, the Press-Gazette gave him the Saturday editorial page. And he would write an article every Saturday about local history. And so he would spend hours in the library reading microfilm we had a running tab for him. So because he wrote those articles, people all over the community every week got a piece of local history in their newspaper. And when I first started working at the library, I used to get scrapbooks in of those articles that had been saved and glued in scrapbooks because series ran to 1970. 656 articles. That's the reason why people in Green Bay have such a basic knowledge, because it came to them free every week with the newspaper. They all knew about Tank Cottage, they all knew about all of those different aspects of the community and the fur trading and Marquette and Joliet and just the whole thing. So he wrote about all of it. It was great. Nobody will ever do it again. It'll never be done again. That anybody that works for a newspaper will have the latitude to be able to write like that for 12 years.
The interest in history just kept growing, and suddenly the history keepers had a big problem and an even bigger solution. Deborah Martin and her friends had preserved so many historic structures spread over such a large area that they were getting difficult to maintain. The buildings had already been moved from their original sites, so why not bring them all together in one place where they could be lovingly cared for and easily visited? That very special place was called Heritage Hill.
I think the most important thing about Heritage Hill is it's a living history experience. It's a window to the past of Green Bay. It's an insight into the immigrant spirit and multicultural beginnings that Green Bay had.
Jack Rudolph's articles helped with knowing that all these buildings were important because he had been writing about them for all those years. So there was a whole group in the 60s and into the 70s pushing for the establishment of Heritage Hill and getting them all in the same place. You'd always see basically 3 women together, and it was Dorothy Strobel-Wittig and Amanda Cobb and Jane Hasbrook.
And I have a photo of them hanging over my desk that usually reminds me of why I do this on a daily basis. And they spent countless hours, and there were many other people involved. A tremendous amount of debate over whether this should happen or not. We still have yard signs that say, "Vote yes." They started moving buildings, some by land, some by river. Tank Cottage was moved on a barge.
They put them on barges and floated them down the river. And they did some of it in the winter. And I, honest to God, thought, I've got to take off a day of work, because at some point in time when somebody says, Tank Cottage ended up in the river, I would be able to say I saw it go.
It's just really neat to see the kids, because it's a very different experience for many of them. You know, it's one thing to read about it in a book or see a picture of it or look in a case and see something that is from our past, but to be able to touch it and feel it and experience it or do it yourself is truly learning in my mind. And that's exciting to see them do that. I think I'm privileged and blessed to be part of a tradition of people in our community who have found it important to tell the story. And every time a building is preserved or an artifact is retained, and we have the privilege of holding that for the future and sharing that with the community, you know, I'm thankful that that's happened and thankful that I'm able to be a part of it. You know, I see all these kids that come into the park as the future history keepers. So all those mothers who say, you're going to be a history major in college? What are you going to do with that? We say, well, come and work at Heritage Hill. We need you.
Keeping history in Green Bay and Brown County is no longer remarked upon. It is simply an accepted part of the community fabric. Everywhere you turn, there are history keepers busy continuing the tradition of preserving and promoting local history. One such place is the Area Research Center at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay.
The collections or the materials, or many of them, are owned by the State Historical Society, and then we administer them. So what that means is that we are responsible for housing and providing answers to questions for things from northeastern Wisconsin. So we might have a diary of an immigrant, letters of a woman suffragette, original court cases, business records, and so on. So we have all kinds of materials then, all in their original format. I say that this job is the best job because there's always variety. When the door opens, you never know what that person who's coming in is looking for. I can save everything, but if I can't find a way for somebody to use it and match a user with that thing, it was all for naught then. What's the point of saving it? So that's what I think my job is really as a history keeper, is to match the person and their research need, whether they know if they have it or not. So the door is always open. I've been accused of being an archivist evangelist. I go out and I can almost always find a reason to bring somebody into the archives, or to, wow, you could use this, or wow, you could do that, or have you ever thought about teaching your class with this set of records, or this might work, or I can tell you how old your house is, or whatever it might be. So I'm always out there promoting and recruiting and evangelizing, saying, come to the archives, there's something for everyone.
Seven Oaks, was it? Seven Oaks. Looking out the window, we see Scarlett O'Hara.
And just up the Fox River, the De Pere Historical Society is making history a favorite community pastime with the picture show.
At a board meeting, Joe Ceruggi was sitting with his laptop, and I'm watching him as he's looking at old photos that he had scanned onto the computer. And as I'm sitting there, I thought, wow, we could actually project these photos up onto a screen to a crowd and maybe get some information that might be lacking. And if people wanted, maybe they could bring in some of their photos. The initial thought was, if we could just interest 8 to 10 people, we thought that would have been great. Put it in the newspaper, inviting them to come. We ended up having, I would estimate, 60 to 70 people show up. So it was fun, and they really enjoyed it. We do it in a format that is real interactive, kind of just shout it out type of a thing. I think it's exciting. A lot of the people see something from their past, and one of the great things is when we can put up a photo of something that everybody in the room has forgotten. I can think of a gas station on Broadway that we put it up and they're like, wow, we forgot all about that place.
You remember that?
After the first show, another couple offered to come in and scan photos if people would bring them in. They started to scan the photos in the back of the room, and at that point what we were able to do is document all the information on the photos with the person sitting right there. We estimate that we've added on close to 9,000 photos since we started it. We have a lot of fun, the give and take back and forth, maybe even arguing over who's in a photo or what the photo is of, generating not just interest, but also documenting facts when it comes to the photos. We figure if we can get 3-4 people to agree, we can pretty much put it in stone.
And yes, even that football team that calls Green Bay home is proud to share its history.
The Hall of Fame just started as a summer tourist attraction. Out of that, it grew into what it is today, which is one of the nicest sports museums in the country. Our history is very important to us. That's the charm of the Packers, is the history. How did we survive in this little community all those years? When people come to these games on weekends and you see them tailgating, how many of the people really know who Curly Lambeau was and what he did, and the tough times that it took to get to the extravaganza that we have today? So part of our job, I think, with the Hall of Fame is to help educate people where we came from and how we got here. It's an incredible story. And to do it through the museum visually, I think it's the best way to tell that story. We were able to build this collection. I mean, the archives that we have here, they're incredible. We have them valued at somewhere in the neighborhood of about $2 million. But all of that's been donated by fans. This is a ball that we received just within the last year, and it's a terrific piece. It's from 1934 and 1935, signed by the Packers teams from those 2 years. So they had some great players on these teams, all hand autographed. The fellow that donated, his name was Jim Miller, and his mother was the manager at the Astor Hotel in Green Bay, where a lot of the players stayed. And it's been in the family for all these years. And there you can see E.L. Curly Lambeau's signature, just as clear as can be. I mean, I'm amazed sometimes at some of the significant donations that we still get when you look at the real value involved in not only the willingness to donate these things to the Packers Hall of Fame, but Packers fans look upon it as a privilege almost, that their items would be accepted by the Hall of Fame and would be exhibited for the public.
This is a place pregnant with history, and it continues to give birth to new history keepers.
I think everyone has a unique passion and a desire to contribute to their community and to their society. When I look at the Antiquarian Society and the Brown County Historical Society, the De Pere Historical Society, there are many existing historical societies, and there continue to be more all the time. Howard Suamico has just begun a historical society. Alloway is beginning their own historical society. We've recently had a number of them band together to create a Brown County Federation of History Museums so that we can work together to promote the history of Green Bay.
It wasn't magic. It wasn't fate. It could happen in any community. All it takes is for somebody to begin. The celebration of local history happened in this place because those early history keepers attracted others with their passion and passed along the understanding that what led us to where we are is an essential part of who we are.
Studying history gives us an opportunity to hopefully learn from our mistakes. I doubt that we do very often. But I think there will constantly be a desire to understand more about who we are, and the easiest way to do that is to look at our past.
The voices from the hill are calling me, come hither, calling, calling, calling me, come home. Do you remember those days long ago? Voices will bring back the past, stories of life and of death so long ago will echo the times in our lives. So here they are today, recalling all those stories, calling, calling, calling me, come home.
Funding for The History Keepers was provided by lead gifts from Irene Daniel Kress and Patricia Baer, with major support from Philip J. and Elizabeth B. Hendrickson, Wisconsin Public Service, Associated Bank, the Kress Family Foundation and Green Bay Packaging, the Robert T. and Betty Rose Meyer Foundation, the Long Family Foundation. Additional support from the Joseph and Sarah Van Dries Charitable Trust, John and Gisela Brogan, Vincent Zarin, and the Wisconsin History Fund, supported in part by the National Endowment for the Humanities.